Sleeping Beauty. Long ago, a king and queen wished very much for a child. For many years they waited, and then, at last, a daughter was born. The kingdom rejoiced. Bells rang. Tables were laid. Candles burned late into the evening. To celebrate, the king invited wise women from across the land to bless the child. There were 13 in all. But the palace had only 12 golden plates, and so only 12 were invited. One by one, the wise women stepped forward. Each offered a gift: grace, kindness, music, understanding, patience, joy. When the 12th had spoken, the doors of the hall opened quietly. The 13th wise woman had come. She had not been invited. She stood still for a long moment. Then she spoke. When the princess reaches her 16th year, she said calmly, she shall prick her finger upon a spindle and fall down as though dead. A hush settled across the hall. But before fear could rise too high, the 12th wise woman stepped forward. She had not yet given her blessing. I cannot undo the words spoken, she said gently, but I may soften them. The princess shall not die. She shall sleep, and after 100 years she shall awaken. The hall grew quiet again. The king, troubled, ordered that every spindle in the kingdom be gathered and burned. For many years the princess grew. She was thoughtful and kind. She walked often through the gardens and listened carefully when others spoke. The shadow of the 13th blessing faded from daily life. On the morning of her 16th birthday, the king and queen rode out, leaving the princess in the palace. She wandered through rooms she had never entered before, up narrow staircases, through quiet corridors. At the very top of a tower, she found a small door. She opened it. Inside sat an old woman turning a spindle. The thread moved steadily between her fingers. The princess had never seen such a thing before. "What are you doing?" she asked. "I am spinning," the woman replied. The princess reached out, curious. As she touched the spindle, she pricked her finger. It was no more than a small sharpness, but at once she lay down upon the floor, and she slept. The sleep moved outward like a slow breath. The old woman slept. The servants in the kitchen slept. A cook paused mid-step. A stable hand rested beside a horse. A dog curled upon the floor. Even the king and queen, returning through the gates, fell gently asleep. The fire in the hearth lowered but did not go out. Outside, the wind softened. Around the castle, a hedge of thorns began to grow. At first, it was thin, then thicker. It rose along the walls and wrapped around the gates. Year by year, it wove itself tightly. The world beyond continued. Seasons turned. Leaves fell and returned. Snow gathered and melted. Children were born in nearby villages who had never seen the castle doors open. Stories were told of the sleeping kingdom beyond the thorns. Many tried to enter, but the hedge was dense. It did not yield. 100 years passed in this way. On the morning the 100th year ended, a young prince rode through the forest. He had heard the old stories. He had heard of a castle wrapped in thorns. He rode not with urgency, but with quiet curiosity. As he approached, he saw the hedge had changed. The thorns were covered in blossoms. The branches parted easily as he stepped forward. The gates stood open. Inside, the palace remained as it had been. A broom leaned against a wall. A cup rested on a table. Dust had settled lightly, but nothing had decayed. The prince walked softly through the halls. He climbed the narrow staircase. At the top of the tower, he found the small room. There lay the princess, her hands folded, her breath steady, her face calm, as though in a deep and peaceful dream. He knelt beside her. For a long moment he simply looked at her, not in astonishment, but in quiet recognition of the stillness around him. Then he bent and kissed her gently. As the first light of the morning touched the tower window, her eyes opened. At that same moment, the castle stirred. The cook finished his step. The fire lifted its flame. The dog stretched and yawned. The king and queen woke as though from a gentle afternoon rest. No one felt the 100 years. It had passed like a single night. The thorns fell away from the walls. The gates opened fully once more. The kingdom resumed its quiet rhythm. The princess, who had slept beneath the turning of 100 seasons, stepped into the light, and the castle, which had waited patiently through time itself, stood steady and unchanged. For some things are not lost in sleep. They are simply held until the moment comes to wake.